Hey, my name's Leanne, and I was born and raised in the US, and when I became an adult, I really wanted to go on a big adventure. I wanted to live in a foreign country, a country that was a lot different than the one that I was currently living in. So I made the trek all the way from Washington State, all the way to British Columbia, and I moved to Canada. And these are some of the differences that I've noticed since living here. So of course, as you all know, we live in igloos up here in Canada, but it's really cold here all the time, so we want to use heat. So we all have heaters inside of our igloos. One of the worst things is at the coldest time of the year, you're sleeping all cuddly warm under your flannel sheets, and you wake up to this freezing cold drop of water coming from the ceiling, and that's because your heater is, melting your walls and your ceiling of your home. So you actually have to work to find a balance between keeping your igloo warm enough to be comfortable in, and also, not melting your shelter. Here where I live on Vancouver Island, it's the warmest region in Canada. So I would say we actually get about 10 and a half months out of the 12 months of the year. It's snowing, but we get a month and a half of summer, which is pretty unique to us over here. The rest of Canada, the East Coast, they get maybe a week of summer if they're lucky. And the snow is, beautiful and Canadian and all, but it's really a pain in the butt. I live within walking distance to my office, so I walk to work. It's not just putting your shoes on anymore before you go out the door. It's putting your shoes on and putting your snowshoes on every single day, and you gotta flop to work. It's a lot slower than regular walking. It's not the worst thing ever, but it's quite an inconvenience to have to snowshoe to work every day. Cooking here takes me a lot longer because I now have to cut my cheese if I want to use cheese on anything, and as you know, in the States, you would just sprayed our cheese on everything. That's just one of the little things that just is a bit of a nuisance. It's no big deal though. In the US, we have the right to bear arms, but in Canada, of course, we don't have the right to bear arms. So unfortunately, when I came here, I had to go through my closet and throw away all of my tank tops and all of my t-shirts because I have to wear long sleeve shirts now. I'm not allowed to bare my arms. And yeah, that seems a little backwards, but you know what? It kind of doesn't really matter. It's so cold here, you want to be wearing long sleeves all the time anyway. But it certainly does limit your fashion and what you're able to do with it. Conversations here. I can't tell you. You can only talk about half the things you could talk about when I lived in the US, because here it takes us twice as long. You have to say every sentence in English and in French. No matter who you're talking to, what conversation you're in, you always got to say both. The grapefruit is on the table. Le pamplemousse est sur la table. Now, to pay for things that Canadians get, like free healthcare, we are taxed pretty heavily here, a lot more heavily than we were in the US. So while I was used to seeing a pretty average paycheck when I lived in the US, here in Canada, after taxes, every paycheck is like, $10.15. And it is really hard to save up for things when you're only making $10.12 or 15 cents, every 2 weeks. But at least most things are free, so it kind of balances out. Canada is under the British monarchy, so, Queen Elizabeth, she's our jam. So every time something big happens in the royal family, like an engagement or a wedding, no matter what time of day it is, work stops. Not allowed to buy anything in the stores. A siren will go off. For example, when Harry and Meghan were just announced as engaged, bells started ringing in downtown and all the stores, and everyone had to stop what they were doing. They all got up and the men bowed and the women curtsied, and then we kept going about our way. But every time there's a big event in the royal family, everything stops in Canada. Not for long, just for a couple of seconds, just enough time for everyone to pay their respects and either bow or curtsy. My least favorite part of living here is that there are no Starbucks in Canada. We just don't have Starbucks. Instead, there's a Tim Hortons everywhere, and that's where you have to get your coffee, no matter what. And I just miss my comfort Starbucks. The first time I was here at a sports event and the national anthem came on, the Canadian anthem, as I was taught in the US, took off my hat. I was surprised to see everyone else around me put their hats on. So it turns out that in Canada, you put your toque on during the national anthem to show your Canadian pride. So now I always have a toque in my purse, so if you ever hear the anthem, I've got it ready. Everyone talks about how nice Canadians are. They're so polite. And you know what? That's true. They really are so polite. Except the one thing that Canadians are not nice about is Americans. So I have to hide my American identity here. I'm always trying to throw in words like a and say a boat, just so that they don't realize that I'm an American. Because if they found out, who knows what would happen. Those Canadians, they seem really nice, and that makes them even scarier when they're mad. Of course, there are a lot of great things about living in Canada too. One of those benefits we get is healthcare. Healthcare is free to every single Canadian, and it includes everything. So you have a cold, need to go to the doctor, that's 100% covered. If you want laser hair removal, 100% covered. You know, tummy tucks, facelifts. When you go into the drugstore, I mean, drugs are on the shelf the same way that you see them in the US, but instead of a dollar amount, I mean, it's just $0. So I can get my ibuprofen for free, Band-Aids for free, really anything you need healthcare, that's covered 100% here. I mean, Canada cares about its people and their health a lot more than the US does, so that's definitely been a big benefit. And you know, it's nice for me because I can just be popping pills left and right when I have a cold or a flu or whatever it is. You know, you can just take all the meds you want and it's free, it's covered. Why not? So another great thing about being Canadian now, and I have a Canadian passport, is that I can finally travel the world. I mean, you know how it is. Americans they cannot cross borders. They can't travel anywhere because everyone in every other country in the world, they just hate Americans. But now that I have a Canadian passport, I can finally travel safely and in peace around the world because who doesn't like a Canadian? Now, a lot of people don't know this, but thrift stores are actually a lot more popular in Canada than they are in the US, and that's because of the board game section. So all Canadians, including me, I'm spending so much time in thrift stores now in the board game section looking for old copies of Monopoly, because as we all know, Canadians use Monopoly money as currency. So if you can find a Monopoly game for, you know, $1 or $2 at the Salvation Army, I mean, there could be hundreds of dollars in that Monopoly game. One of the cool positive side effects I've had living in Canada for 10 whole years is I am a lot stronger now. And that's because we have loonies and toonies. Loonies are basically $1, but they're a coin, and toonies are a $2 coin. And we don't have dollar bills. So you're carrying around a lot more coins than you did in the US. And coins are heavy, man. They are way heavier than bills. So I'm just carrying a lot more weight on my body every single day, and that adds up little by little. You become a lot more athletic just by living here and having to use Canadian currency. Just coins all the time. I mean, now that I think about it, it could be one of the reasons why Americans, you know, tend to lean more toward obesity than Canadians do, because we're just getting a constant workout whether we like it or not. Oh, another thing that was crazy is that there's no sugar in Canada. None. No white sugar, no brown sugar, no sugar substitutes like honey or stevia. The only sweetener we have in Canada is maple syrup. That's it. Nothing else. So if you don't know how to bake with maple syrup, or if you don't like maple syrup in your coffee, I mean, it's not going to go well here. So those are some of the biggest things that I noticed since I've been living here for the last 10 years as an American. I certainly love Canada and all the differences. Some are positive and some are negative, but they're not too bad. All in all, I love living here. Bye!